Hello, everybody. Good morning or good afternoon, good evening, whenever you're watching this. It's morning right now. Appreciate you joining us for our third installment of our From the Experts series. Today, we're going to be focusing on why supplementation. I know that's a lot of people have this question, like why do we need to supplement today? What's the purpose behind it? Do we really need to? Those types of things. And so we have an expert, as the series is from the experts. We have an expert, Austin Weiniger, who he actually helps us. As you can see, he's over the Global Health and Science Education team, senior manager there. And he helps run AskTheScientists.com, which is basically our information database. And so any questions you have about supplements, about the supplements that Usana provides, he is kind of behind all that information, him and his team. So who better than to explain to us today why we need to supplement? So Austin, I'm excited to hear what you have to say. I'm going to turn the time over to you.
Okay, thank you. Give everybody a little more background kind of about what brings me here. So I'm one of the research and development members at Usana. And so I've worked in various roles from product development or adapting and upgrading our formulas as new science and research comes out. I've worked with actually doing clinical research a little bit because we are often studying individual ingredients in our products, complete formulas of the products. And also what I spend most of my time doing now, which is what brings me here today, is customer education, kind of basically sharing with you what we're doing within the product development team at Usana Health Sciences. I'm going to try and answer a couple of questions for you. Basically, why do you need to worry about nutrition? Because before you can even look at supplementation, you need to look at nutrition as a whole, what it does for us, for our bodies, kind of what it has long-term impact-wise. And exactly the number two question is, what are the right levels of nutrients? So looking at what we should be consuming in comparison to what we are consuming, essentially. So let's answer that first question. Why do we need to worry about nutrition? This is Dr. Myron Wentz. He was the founder of Usana about 30 years ago is where we're at right now. And this is one of the things he loves to say is that we're living too short and dying too long. And what he means by that essentially is that living too short is pretty self-explanatory, where our lives aren't long enough, but the dying too long, there's a lot of interesting data on that, basically showing that we spend a significant portion of our lives, that last decade or two, sick and kind of in an ailment state or just not living the best lives that we could be. And there's, as I said, a lot of data to back that up. So this is looking at Medicare data, not necessarily illnesses, but costs related to those illnesses is what this study is about. And you can see it accelerates pretty quickly. We spend 2/3 of all healthcare expenses just in that last decade or two of our lives. And it ends up being, more than previous 65, 70 years of our life combined just in the last decade or so. And so it really accelerates. And then you have to think about not only the costs associated with that, which we're paying in a lot of different ways, whether it's out of pocket, through health insurance, through taxes that go to different government agencies in the US, but also just the time you're spending sick. We all know those people who retire and then they never actually leave their couch once they retire. They just spend the rest of their days watching TV and not doing a whole lot, when there's a lot of things that you could be doing that are much more enjoyable and just being more active throughout our lives if we were a little bit healthier and choosing to do so. Kind of when you start pinpointing down what those different ailments are, you find that it's chronic degenerative conditions. It's not simple small injuries, the ones that we might be more familiar with when we're younger. You trip and stub your toe or hurt your toe. It's not that sort of thing. It's chronic degenerative things. So you're looking at heart health conditions or things more related to that. I don't have these labeled here, but this kind of shows some of these chronic degenerative conditions. And for these four in particular ones, which we're familiar with, I mentioned cardiovascular concerns, or there's type 2 diabetes is that biggest one. And you find that about 90% of type 2 diabetes cases are avoidable through lifestyle modifications. And that's a lot of these that are so prevalent in the latter days of our lives are avoidable through lifestyle modifications. And I'm not talking exclusively diet at this point yet. I'm talking exercising on a regular basis. So, exercising at least 90 minutes, 2 hours a week, maintaining a healthy weight, eating, not only just maintaining a healthy weight, but eating the fruits and vegetables, getting enough fiber in our diet, micronutrients. There's a lot of different things that impact this. You'll also see, as I'm pointing out in this next chart here, a couple of the biggest ones. You have smoking is probably the single biggest item, is not smoking, contributes to a big portion of staying healthy. And so what this particular chart is looking at total number of deaths and basically individual causes of those deaths. You find smoking is number one, high blood pressure, obesity, physical inactivity. So some of these I've mentioned already. And as you get a little bit further down this chart, lower half, you find that dietary factors are also responsible for a number of these deaths. You find too much sodium is one of those, but then a lot of these others are too little of things. So too little omega-3 fatty acids, too few fruits and vegetables on a daily basis, not enough polyunsaturated fatty acids, too much alcohol. So there's a lot of things that we're choosing to do that impact our long-term health over time. This was an interesting study that was done several years ago. This is 2014, if I remember right, but they put together, this is the Council for Responsible Nutrition, which is kind of a supplement advocacy group. They put together data from the previous couple decades, looking at the role of supplementation. So now we're really narrowing down on supplements, not just lifestyle modifications, and what supplementation can do for a few individual health risk areas. So I'll just use the osteoporosis in the blue there. It's kind of the example I'll walk through. And what they were looking at for osteoporosis and the data and research they dug into is basically the role of calcium, vitamin D, and magnesium supplementation on osteoporosis, which we're all aware that's basically the weakening of the bones. You've got bones, it's not so much the size as much density of those, how hard they are inside. And what that next row shows is that about 15% of the population will experience osteoporosis. This is more predominant in women over the age of 60s, who that's primarily going to be focused on. And they were looking at what calcium, vitamin D, and magnesium can do to that incidence rate. And they found that it can reduce it by anywhere from 6 to 18.6% in these studies that they were going through. And so you have a pretty significant portion of those people that can be prevented from coming down with the symptom simply by taking supplementation of calcium, vitamin D, and magnesium. You find age-related eye disease is another one that's greatly impacted by supplementation, a few different areas of cardiovascular health. And so really there's a lot of things you can do to help prevent some of these chronic degenerative conditions through supplementation. So kind of in summary there, what you put in your mouth matters. There's lots and lots of extra data I have showing this, but I just wanted to pull out those few pinpoint items to show you that it does matter. And we've all experienced that before. We know that if we have been eating unhealthy for a few days, we might feel a little bit worse, versus if we're eating healthy, if we're exercising regularly, we'll feel better in our day-to-day lives. So what are the right levels of nutrients? What should we be targeting? Conventional wisdom, which we're more familiar with, is, instead of a greasy pizza or hamburger, we should be eating a salad with some lean meat on it, some salmon or chicken, or there's tofu you can put on it. There's a lot of different options, but we kind of generally know what a healthier diet is. We've all experienced that before. Here's your problem with typical unhealthy diet. You might look at this and you see, oh, I've got some whole grains, I've got meat, I've got dairy, I've got vegetables in the form of fries, but the reality is a meal like this, in the red circle there, is greatly lacking in these essential vitamins and minerals that we need. It's okay on vitamin C or vitamin A, and it's okay on iron, but it's really just doesn't contain a whole lot of anything else. Our food labeling laws here have it so that if it's less than 5% of the daily recommended amount, it's just not listed on the label. So that's why it's missing all the other B vitamins, for example, magnesium, manganese. It doesn't have enough to bother labeling them on this particular product. Not to mention, it's consuming half to 2/3 of your calories for your day for this particular meal. It's really low in fiber, only 4 grams compared to the 25 to 35 grams we should be having in a day. So this is the problem with these typical fast food meals that are convenient and we too often reach for here in America. And there's data to show that this is largely what we're eating. So these are your most frequent deficiencies in the United States. So you can see that vitamin A, we have 47% of men are deficient in that, 39% of women. Vitamin E is one that's very, very common. We have 85% of women, 71% of men are deficient in vitamin E. And you can go on down the line. This wasn't all the nutrients that we are deficient in. These are just ones that I updated recently and kind of pinpointed some of the key ones that are so frequently the cause of deficiencies here in the United States. What's interesting is that these deficiencies are deficient in relationship to those recommended dietary amounts. So that's that 100% mark on your food label. That's what we're deficient in all of these cases. The data shows when you start to dig in to some of the nutrition data and research that are done by universities, my group at Usana, other government agencies all around the world. I spend a lot of data, and my team does, I spend a lot of time along with my team going through that data and finding out what the real nutrient levels are that we should be aspiring for. And the reality is that in most cases, they're significantly higher than those recommended dietary amounts, that we're not even doing a good job with those either. Those recommended dietary amounts were largely developed they've been updated briefly since then, but not a lot. But they were largely developed during World War II to prevent nutritional deficiency diseases for soldiers. They were sending pre-prepared meals or sending, kind of having some minimum amounts they were trying to feed when they were feeding large people in training camps as well as on the front lines. And they didn't want people having, scurvy or these things that you hear about sailors having back hundreds of years ago because they weren't receiving enough citrus fruits in their diet. But they're really minimum amounts. It's essentially what you would define as the poverty level income if you were to convert it to money, which the poverty level, I believe for an individual in the US, when I looked it up recently, it was about $14,000 for an individual, or for a family of 4, it was about double that, $28,000 a year. So it's not a lot of money, and that is the equivalent of these RDA levels, is basically that same type of level from a nutritional standpoint. It's very minimum amounts that are just, barely keeping you from having some of these nutritional deficiency diseases like I talked about, scurvy, rickets for vitamin D. These are not aspirational levels. This chart here is looking a little bit more at what levels we should be aspiring for. So the RDA is where this red dot is. Anything below that is that deficiency level. So I'll reference vitamin C throughout this. So that would be that scurvy, potentially collagen synthesis, which is related to that scurvy I've mentioned several times. That's what you're avoiding by reaching that RDA level. However, at higher levels, this is basically following blood concentration based on a dosage. At higher levels, you'll find that there's a lot of extra benefits to any given nutrient. So in the case of vitamin C, you have carnitine and catecholamine synthesis, which are related to energy synthesis within the body. Above that, you have a lot of different antioxidant activity, which can be related to cardiovascular health, eye and vision health long-term. So there's a lot of extra benefits from eating more than just that recommended dietary amount. In the case of vitamin C, based on your age, gender, the RDA is anywhere from 40 to 125 milligrams per day. But the optimal dose where you're receiving all those additional health benefits is, once again, depending on the individual, but you're looking a little over 1,000 milligrams per day is where the optimal dose starts to come in. Problem with that is actually eating that from diet alone. So this is where supplementation starts to make a little bit more sense, is to have 1,000 milligrams of vitamin C. You're about 10 glasses of orange juice or 10 oranges. One glass is kind of roughly close to an individual orange. So you're looking a little over 1,000 calories per day just for your vitamin C. And this is one of the better sources of vitamin C and more efficient calorie sources. So suddenly you have this problem of maintaining a healthy weight while also achieving the optimal values of these different micronutrients that you need in your diet on a daily basis. Vitamin E is even worse than vitamin C. So recommended dietary amount, this is the one that we had, I think 84% of women were deficient in vitamin E. Well, that deficiency is based on the RDA, anywhere from 6 to 28.5 IUs. Comparatively, data from long-term research studies show that we should be targeting closer to about 200 IUs per day of vitamin E. 200 IUs ends up about 1.5 pounds of almonds, or 4,500 calories of almonds roughly. So vitamin C and vitamin E, we're at 5,500 calories per day. Suddenly, as I mentioned, we're really pushing the limits of what you can eat and maintain a healthy weight at the same time, which has its own negative consequences. Vitamin D, you have anywhere from 400 to 800 IUs per day is the recommendation, versus optimal amounts are about 4,000 IUs per day. Vitamin D, unfortunately, there's not a lot of great dietary sources of this. So vitamin D primarily comes from the sun. And so when the sun hits your skin, it creates kind of this chain reaction that converts basically cholesterol to vitamin D within the body. And so one of your best sources is simply going out and spending a little bit of time in the sun. But data is showing that more and more we're spending our jobs and our entertainment activities are being done indoors versus outside. So we're not spending as much time in the sun. And then when we do go in the sun, we're worried about skin damage. So we're working on sunscreen, which blocks vitamin D synthesis. So really you end up having to acquire all of your vitamin D from your diet. And there's just not a lot of great sources of it. Even milk, which is one of the best ones, is actually fortified. And by fortified, I mean vitamin D is added to the milk to have what little is in there. So you're looking at about 34 glasses of milk on a daily basis. So it's really difficult to achieve all the vitamins and minerals that you need on a daily basis. And I won't go through every vitamin and mineral, but this holds true for most of them. There's extra health benefits, whether it's cardiovascular health benefits, skin benefits, immune system. It's tied to lots and lots of different nutrients from having levels above and beyond just that recommended dietary amount that most of us aren't even achieving that alone. So that's where Usana Cell Essentials kick in. The Usana Cell Essentials is a product that the research and development team I'm a part of designed that helps you have all the recommended dietary amounts for your vitamins, minerals, as well as it has a special antioxidant blend that plays a lot of different roles in basically helping your body develop antioxidants on its own to support its long-term health. And that's really the first product, if you're wondering what you should be taking, is the Cell Essentials to help fortify your already healthy diet with the vitamins and minerals that you need on a daily basis. And then depending on your own individual needs, which will vary from individual to individual, whether you're concerned about vision health, your microbiome and gut health, whether women might need a little bit more calcium and vitamin D on a daily basis. We have a whole variety of different supplements that you can look into. And if you're wanting to know a little bit more about which supplements you should take, you can go to askthescientist.com, which is that website the research and development team I'm a part of runs. And we have lots of information about every one of these supplements. We have more information about your immune system or cardiovascular health, your bone and joints. So anything you're looking for, you can find more information there, and you can even email my team about data about these products or these ingredients, and we'll send you information. With that, I just want to thank you for your time and hand it back over to Nathan.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much. That was some great information. And I do love the quote that Dr. Wentz said about we're living too short and dying too long. And it's amazing to me how much, if we were to just go off of what we eat, how much we would have to eat in order to hit that, just the minimum, the bare minimum of what we're recommended. So thank you so much. Austin, I wonder, there was one question that we've seen that came through. I wonder if you have just time for answering one question.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So John asked, this is through YouTube. He asked, does it matter when you take your supplements, especially if you work nights, because I guess the circadian rhythm is a little bit off. Does that have an effect?
So, and there's not a lot of impact on these circadian rhythms or your sleep pattern. You might read a little bit of research out there tying magnesium to sleep and these different energy levels, but from just a purely supplement point of view, like the Cell Essentials, you can take it and it shouldn't have any impact on your sleep cycles.
Okay.
However, outside of sleep, it does matter a little bit when you take your supplements. Let me actually go back a few slides because that's a good question. So this slide here, this dosage and blood concentration will dip again over time. So it goes up, and this doesn't actually show it, but depending on the nutrients, some of these water-soluble nutrients like the B vitamins or vitamin C are going to start dipping and dropping in your blood after just a couple of hours. And so this is why if you read the label on those Cell Essentials, it'll recommend taking it 2 doses per day. Is that way you can have that spike in your blood level, it'll drop, but then you take your second dose later on in the day and it'll spike it again. So these fat-soluble things they don't shift quite as much throughout the day, but that's why you would want to split up your dose throughout the day. Make sure to take it with a meal, which will increase absorption of these nutrients. So generally, I would just recommend generally in the morning, breakfast, sometime in the afternoon and evening for your second dose, and that'll keep your blood levels of these nutrients higher for longer amounts of time.
Awesome. Great. So John, thanks for that question. Austin, thanks for the answer, and then explaining a little bit more as to why it's important to take both doses, the recommended doses on those bottles. So Austin, again, thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it, and you're sharing your expertise with us. And we will do this again next week for our final installment of the From the Experts series. So thanks so much, everybody. Hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thanks.